this is Lisa with Queen Bee Creation, and this is a step card, and it is fairly easy. It looks complicated, but I'm going to try to break that down to you where it's not. We're going to start out with a standard card base. So you're just going to have your 5.5 by 8.5 scored at 4.25. And then we're going to have a layer that's going to go on top. And this one is your 4 inches by 5.25. So far, we're just a regular plain old card, right? We're going to do a few cuts in it with the paper trimmer to fancy it up a bit. I'm going to give you guys this diagram. This is from a card I did a long time ago. This was the baby dresser, but we're going to be just basically playing with this graphic. And I will put this on my blog post when I post this card. And this will show you the cuts we're going to make. So you can see the 5.5 by 8.5 with the 4.25 is there, but we're going to make a cut down the middle and we're going to make a couple extra score lines. And I'm going to show you how we do that. So I made sure to tell you guys last time that I ran a piece of tear and tape down the edge of my trimmer because I want to be able to use the numbers that are on here. And so if I put the white behind it, now this old lady can read the numbers. So what I want to do is I want to bring this in at 2 3/4. So I'm going to put it at 2 3/4 here, but then I'm going to take my cutting blade and I'm going to take the line in the middle of my cutting blade and I'm going to move that down to 1 inch. So if I just watch this from the side, I can line up that line with 1 inch. Then I'm going to push down, and that's what's going to start my cut. It's going to be 1 inch up from the bottom, and I'm going to go down to 6 3/8, which is one little tick before 6 1/2, and that's our cut. Okay. Now you can either score this on your trimmer, or you can bring in the scoring tool. I tend to like to use my Simply Scored because it allows me to be more precise. Both will work. You know, there's no preference one or the other, but this was my choice. You can do this on the trimmer if you'd like, but we're going to go 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 1/8, which is just one little tick mark over. So in between the 3 and 3.25 is 3 1/8. Our 4.5 is already here. That's what we did when we first started. And then I'm going to do 6 3/8. And so again, that's between 6.25 and 6.5. It's this one in the middle. And see, that's why I like the Simply Scored better than my trimmer. I can see better. I can be more exact. I know my little tick marks. I don't have to line up on that thing. So looks like I was a little bit short on my trimmer. See, tell you I make better measurements on this thing. So I don't know if I put those in there, but let's go a little bit longer with this. I guess I didn't go all the way to 6 3/8. And there's our card base. So now all we're going to do is we're going to fold this one as we normally would. Okay, that's going to be our in half, right? Then we're going to fold these down and up, down and up. So that's going to make our side step. So I'm just going to burnish this with my bone folder. So here's our card, our cover. So this is what's going to be the designer series paper behind here, right? And so we knew this was 1 inch from the bottom. So this needs to be 3/4. This was 2.75 or 2 3/4. So we needed to be 2 1/2. So I'm going to bring in my trimmer, 2 1/2 from this side and up from the bottom. So go down to 3/4. And this will be easier to, you know, finalize out with the trimmer or the paper snips once we get it. But I just thought if I started you guys out with a standard card front, that it would be a whole lot easier to understand what I'm doing when I'm cutting this section away. So now that's going to fit right on here. And see how perfectly that just slides right in there? So just cutting that one section off from a standard layer made it a whole lot easier. So now we can go ahead and put that on there. So I'm going to use my Stampin' Seal. I love this new stuff. It's got a little bit of a trick to it in order to snap it off, but that's because it's a stronger tape and it doesn't want to snap off. It wants to stick, which is a good thing. So there's our background. And now for in here, I wanted some trees. And the trees I found in the Merry Moose stamp set. So that's this one right here. And I'm going to pair it with the Wishes and Wonder so that I can have Santa's sleigh and the reindeer, which is going to go on the front. There just weren't, you know, the mistletoe behind it just wasn't going to look the same as trees. So we're going to use these trees. And I'm just going to do 2 of them, and then I'm going to fussy cut them out. I could use my brother's scan and cut, but I find when I'm doing ones and twosies, it's just faster for me to go ahead and just cut them with scissors. Okay, so I wanted 2 trees. I've already stamped my little packages. I pulled these out of the Merry Moose too, because afterwards I just thought that sleigh needed some packages, right? I mean, Santa's out delivering gifts. We should have gifts. And then I'm going to need the sleigh, but I want to go ahead and do that in gold embossing. And embossing is really easy. We're just going to stamp in Versamark ink, which is just kind of a stickier ink. It stays wet a little longer. And so if you wanted to, you could stamp on a standard color. You could stamp on any color you wanted and just let it dry, or maybe heat it with the heat tool without putting any embossing powder on it. And it's just going to go ahead and watermark your paper. So it just is the kind of the same as stamping with cherry cobbler ink on cherry cobbler paper. It's just going to give a little bit of a darkness to it. But if we were to go ahead and stamp it and then cover it with embossing powder, it's going to give us a raised feel, which is really pretty and makes it look much more elegant. So I need my gold embossing powder, which is right under my nose. Go figure. I'm going to make sure I have my heat tool out. Stampin' Up makes a wonderful heat tool that has high and low settings. Go ahead and get this inked up, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp on here. Oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and use the embossing buddy. I know we don't sell it anymore, but it takes the static away from the paper, which makes the embossing powder not stick where it's not supposed to. And if you don't have an embossing buddy, you can also use baby powder or a little bit of cornstarch. Just any kind of fine powder is going to help it only go where it's supposed to go. And then I also have a tendency to do it over a piece of paper that's been folded in half, because it allows me to funnel it right back into the jar so that I don't waste any of it. I can go ahead and give it a really generous covering, make sure it's good and covered. Then I can just tap off the excess, and all of this, because it's in that V, is going to funnel right back into my container, and none of it goes to waste. So my embossing powders last a very long time. I have heard people say that the embossing powders tend to go bad over time, and they might, especially in a wetter climate. Mine have actually done really well. As you can see, this is a really old logo. I mean, we haven't done the blue on our embossing powders in a long time, and mine still works. So I'm happy about that. I'm going to make sure that I heat from both sides, because part of the reason why paper would warp is because it's heated on one side and not the other. It's the heat being uneven that makes the paper warp. So now I have a beautiful gold sleigh, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to color it in with my Stampin' Blends. I liked that look. I did it last time. On another card, what I did is I stamped on our red felt paper, and then I stamped the whole sleigh, and then I cut out just this part in the middle and layered it over the top. And so this part in here is actually the felt paper just glued right over the top. And when I stamped it on here, that's what gave me the lines, and I knew how to cut it out in exactly the right shape, and it fit right in there. So you can choose to do it either way. So again, I started out with the dark, and then I'm going over it with the light. I'm doing lots of swirling, especially where the two colors overlap. If it doesn't blend, you want to just keep laying down ink, because the wetter it gets, the better it's going to blend. And it'll even blend all the way through to the back side. So don't worry about that. Some people say make sure you have your paper underneath, because sometimes they actually do so much coloring it does bleed all the way through, and the ink will get on the paper down here. But it doesn't do that to me too bad. So I'm going to come in here, like I said, I'm going to fussy cut the trees, because I don't have a die for those, but I do have a die for the sleigh. So I'm going to bring in our Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. Stampin' Up is great about standing behind their products, and if you ever have issues with anything that you buy from me, let me know right away, because myself or Stampin' Up is going to make it right. We sell quality materials and we stand behind it. So here is our Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. And as you can see, I've got my plates lined up the way the directions tell me. I have plate number 1, plate number 2. I'm substituting plate number 5 for my other number 3, and then I've got 3 on top. But normally it would be 1, 2, 3, 3 for die cutting. And the sandwiches are like right there on there. And never force it. If you start to put something through there and it gives you some resistance, think about it again and double check. It may just be there's one too many layers in there, or you needed the gray instead of this. I think there's a number 4 that's the gray. Now look at this die. See how that just like sucks to the paper? It just like almost snaps down. I love that. The other one, the old magnetic plate that would still work in this machine, had circles in it, and you had to line up the die where it was touching the circles, because the circles were the magnets. This one is magnet continuously, so it doesn't matter where I put it, it's going to go just fine, and it's moving through very smoothly. It's not taking me a lot of effort to turn, and then it's cutting out beautifully. So there's our sleigh. Now I'm going to come back and I'm going to swap out this, because I don't need my magnetic plate. I know a lot of us have the habit of we'll just leave it in there because it's the right thickness, everything will go through. But I'm going to use a solid die. And there's a tendency that these are a little thicker than the others. And so I don't want to risk warping my plate, and I don't really need it because I'm just going to be cutting out a shape. It's not framing anything. So that's when I can bring back in my other clear plate and I can do 1, 2, 3, 3. And that's the paper that's bent a little, not my plate. And again, it feeds through nice and smooth. It's not taking a lot of effort. And there's my one deer. And then I can flip this over. And I'm going to feed my antlers up into here so that I'm using the most of my paper. So there's my 2 deer. And that's it. The rest is punches. So I think we're set. Punches I'm using are the Label Me Fancy and the Everyday Label. And this one is going to just mount right on top of that one. They fit perfectly. Looks like it's framed. Those are on page 166. Now the moose and the Wishes and Wonder are out of our holiday catalog. Hopefully you have a copy of our holiday catalog. It is adorable and goes through the end of December. If you don't have one, let me know right away and I will pop one in the mail to you, because you want to be able to see this. This is just too cute. The moose is something that sold out last year, and so they carried it over. We even have gnomes. And how cute is this little guy tied up in lights? So cute. Anyway, back to our card. And I'm going to stamp my sentiment and punch that out in white, or yeah, stamp it on white and punch it out. And then I'm going to back it in some red and we can start assembling. I just stamped that. And then I'm going to feed it in here and square it up. Now, I always tend to stamp before I punch because to me, it's easier to line up the punch around my stamp than to punch it and then try to center it within. You can do it either way. This is just my preference and what I tend to be more accurate with. So you can try it both ways and just do what's best for you. This one, because it's just solid, I don't need anything. It's so funny that every time I get my hands really, really inky, if I shampoo my hair that night, all the ink comes off. I don't know what it is about shampoo over soap, but it gets all the ink off my fingers. So I'm going to put this back here. I want it to kind of hide the bottom a little, but not too much. So I know I want it to go right about there, and I'm going to make sure that it is within this edge because I want it to be able to fit in an envelope. Only worry about that if you need it in an envelope. It's okay. You know, if you're just going to sit it on the table, you can make it pop over. It actually gives you a little more room, but if it's off the edge, it's not going to fit in your envelope. Okay, I'm being careful that I don't have much glue sticking over the top. I wipe that off with my fingers because the last thing I wanted to do is stick to the layer back there, right? Probably should have used garden green since that's what's in here. I used shaded spruce, but I think once we get all the reindeer on there, it's not going to be too noticeable. And trees are different colors, right? Okay, so here's our reindeer. There we go. There's our two reindeer. Now we're ready for our sleigh. Now I wanted to have the little ropes go over, so I pulled out some of our cording, and it doesn't need to be very long. So I'm just going to cut a few pieces of it. And this came in a set. It wasn't all by itself. It was two together, basket weave or something. Sorry, I don't know the name of that off the top of my head, but it is in there. Might actually be one in the holiday catalog too, but the basket weave from our standard catalog does work well for this. And I can either put glue dots to hold these on, or I'm going to use a little bit of tear and tape. And then I can go ahead and stick down my sleigh. And I just want them to go behind, and I'm going to put a glue dot right behind his head, right there. And then I can cut off the excess. Better to be too long than too short, right? You can use the tip of your scissors or our take your pick tool for lifting those glue dots up. And then I'm going to roll it a little bit because I want to make sure that it does have a good hold on the cording, but again, it's not going to stick to the thing behind it. Do the same with this one. Slide it in between the tree and our reindeer. I have a separate pair of scissors I use for ribbon, because if I use these on paper or my paper ones on ribbon, they dull. There's something about the way it wears the scissor that it's just better to have a different pair. Well, this is going to work out perfect because I can stick my cording in there and then it's going to stick to the tree. So there's our card. If you wanted to, you could cut a little piece for the back. Again, because this was 2 3/4, you would want to cut a piece 2 1/2 by 4, and that will fit right there. They have a place to write your message, and they will be able to display it at their home. That's one of the great things about cards versus just saying hello on Facebook. I mean, I love Facebook. I'm on it all day long. I talk to people on there, and there's some people I talk to a lot on there that I wouldn't talk to in real life, but there's just something extra special about getting a card in the mail. And then to be able to display it on the counter and show people and look at it and be reminded, it's just extra special, especially during 2020. I think this year has been horrible, and I'm sick of window envelopes. and I want to get something pretty in the mail. And I think other people do too, right? So there we go. There's our card. Thank you for joining me. And I hope you like today's card and that you are able to recreate it yourself. I would love to see people recreate it and post it over in the realm of creativity. I created a special Facebook group where I want people to share the creations that they make with others and with me so that I can reward you with prizes. So again, I thank you for joining me and for being one of my customers. And I do appreciate that you purchase your supplies through me. It helps me to do more of these videos and to teach you more about stamping. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you Monday at 2:30